Hi, True Crime Grapevine fans. It's me, Patty Lee. This is my first crush, meaning this is my first impression of what went on in true crime today. And this is my cohort here, Skelly, who also watches all day with me here on the True Crime Grapevine. And here's all the notes I took today. And here are the cases we're going to be discussing. Most of my day, I will tell you, was spent. Look at me. Sorry. It's been a rough day, people. I don't know how your Thursday's been. Uh, the Daybell trial. Then I went. You can only watch one trial at a time. So I went and watched the Daybell trial today because that's what I started with. The Karen Reed trial I'm following, but I'm going to have to follow that. I'm following the defense diaries talking about it. And Bob Motta is tweeting. And so the Karen Reed trial I will be talking about. And then Gisela K had some information on a hearing that went on yesterday at the Idaho 4 Koberger trial. I know, aren't my cards just so professional? Can you tell I was a kindergarten teacher? Anyway, that's what we're going to be talking about. That's what I watched today on the interwebs. I think something else may have happened that came across Google, and quite frankly, it's been a day, so I did not get to everything. So I don't know if you have a drink, a margarita. It's almost Cinco de Mayo. It is May 3rd. I believe it's 3rd. Is that right? The 2nd. Is it May 2nd? It's the 2nd. Of course it is. The days are going faster than I'd like. So grab something cool to drink. I'm drinking out of a Yeti. I'm a Yeti girl. Not sponsored. I am not one of those. What are the other things? Oh my gosh. The other one that they found it had lead poisoning in it, maybe. Oh, I know. It's the girlies from Idaho and Utah. The Mormon girlies drink out of the, oh, what are those things called? I can't even, it's been a day, you guys. Let's just get right into it. So the Daybell, or when I used to talk to my husband about this case, um, he would go, "Oh, Chad Dumbbell." And now that I think about it, yes, Chad Dumbbell trial. And boy, it was cuckoo for coconuts. And let's see. And I watched it right up until I missed, there was an afternoon break and I didn't see the last couple witnesses. So I apologize about that. But so I get up in the morning, I get right on Pretty Lies and Alibis. Hey, Gigi and crew. I get into their chat. It is a really good chat because even if people don't agree, nobody's rude. Everybody is very nice. And true crime can bring out sometimes the worst in people. And we all have different opinions. So the chats that I like to be in are the true crime, uh, true, oh my God, Pretty Lies and Alibis with Gigi, the Defense Diaries, and Criminalities, and Gisela K's uh, When I Catch Her Lives. They tend to have people who are willing to discuss the merits and the evidence without getting too personal, and nobody gets shady, and people aren't calling names or any sort of stuff aloud. So I highly recommend those cases. So yesterday we talked all about, oh my gosh, that whole thing makes me crazy. Okay. Sorry, I was thinking about Barry Morphew. And I had missed saying that May 1st was Susan Morphew's birthday. And of course, people say it's the heavenly birthday because she's no longer with us. Thanks. And we all know who I think is responsible. Just my opinion. Don't sue me. All right. I'm looking for my notes. You guys, like I said, it was a cuckoo for coconuts, crazy day. All right. We started out in the Daybell chat. Okay. Here we go. See, I did right. If you can see, I knew it was Thursday, May 2nd when I woke up this morning. The first person that was on the stand was this was, hold on a second. Oh, Woodcock took the stand. Now, if you know about the Daybell trial, Kay Woodcock, this wouldn't even be happening if it weren't for her. She was the person that was concerned about where JJ was. Her brother Charles Vallow had been killed by Lori Vallow's brother, Alex Cox. And at the time, JJ had been adopted through her family. Charles is her older brother. Charles and Lori adopted her basically grandchild, her sons, who I think he has now passed, unfortunately, and so has the mother. They had a lot of issues, and that's why they couldn't raise JJ. And so Kay and Larry were raising JJ for like a very little bit after he was born, and it was just so hard. And Lori was young and beautiful and vibrant, and she had Colby, and um, raising Tylee. And I think Tylee was maybe 4 or 5. Charles and Lori were married, like, I think over 10 years. Anyways, so Larry and Kay really thought JJ deserves like this vibrant lifestyle with younger parents, and they would still be able to see them. And so, um, today she talked a lot about that experience of adopting out JJ to Lori and Charles and how hard it was at first. And then the prosecutors, the state had her talk a little bit about, so then, um, but she did see them. She's like, yes. But when she saw them, a lot of times, Charles and Lori would go take a vacation, go do something just for themselves as a couple. And she said, raising JJ was harder. He had autism. So she would, and also it was easier for her and Larry to get his full attention, JJ's full attention, um, when they would go there to visit, just one on one. So there wasn't a distraction of, if you know any autistic little people, that was one of the groups specifically that I learned about in my master's program, and which I really liked to teach and do therapy with. And so I have a strong feeling with those little kiddos too. And, it is good to reduce distractions. So she said, they would go there about a month, every other month. They saw them a lot. And then the prosecutor took her through the whole thing about um, when they began, after they came back from Hawaii. They lived in Hawaii a couple of years. They came back. Then they lived in, I think, the Houston house. I'm trying to think how that fits into the story, which I think Lori liked to live in Arizona, but when they came back from Hawaii in 2014, maybe 15, it was like a year after that where they started having problems. Now, we know from listening to the whole story thus far that by 2018, Lori had met Chad. But there seemed to be having, I think the problem started. I'm trying to think if that's when the major problem started in 2018. And then Charles moved to Houston, and Lori stayed in Arizona. And then Lori had taken off then and disappeared for like a matter of 2 months, over 50 days. And at that time, Kay was saying, "Oh, we took care of JJ. We helped Charles a lot." So I mean, and JJ is blood to them. And she said she was worried because they were separated, and she, was helping out with JJ and would always be there for JJ. And Charles felt it was important too that um, he make sure that Kay would be willing to take care of JJ if anything happened to him. This divorce seemed imminent. Then Lori and he had a small um, getting back together again. And from what we know from Lori's trial and other stuff, and this wasn't all in the prosecution's things, but we know that Lori was basically playing nice, and she thought she was back on his insurance. And I think she put herself on the insurance, but Charles found it. He was alerted by his partner in his business, and he changed it back. And Lori didn't know that. And he changed it to Kay. So the little them trying to get back together didn't really work. And Lori wasn't really interested because, let's just be frank, that's when the first time Chad came to Houston was when Melody Gibb talked about that during Lori's trial. That was in Houston, Texas. Then, since it wasn't working out, Lori got a house in, uh, what do you call it? And they had separate houses, I believe, then in Arizona. Like Charles rented her house, and he had a house kind of close by. Anyway, that is all to say that Kay still, she knew there were problems in the marriage. She knew that there was a divorce imminent, and she was listening to Charles and knew about Charles, and he was trusting her. And she had been helping him with all his, I guess her business was in sort of doing the like what Tammy did for her husband. Uh, Kay did for her brother. She was helping with payroll, like the QuickBooks, all the like paper stuff. So she had his passwords. She knew about. She had access to his computer. She was aware of all that, which comes into play after Charles is killed. She is very worried about JJ. Starts trying to find out where JJ is. So we know after July, when Charles is already gone and passed, Lori is making plans to move and moves at the end of August up to Rexburg, Idaho, and doesn't tell any of those people. So Kay is grieving her brother and very worried about JJ, and wants to try to get him, but then all of a sudden can't find him. And none of the relatives on Lori's side would tell her. And now we know by September it was too late. But she was looking, and she said she plugged in her brother's computer, the printer, to her computer, and was trying to get it work, and it wouldn't work. And she said she just felt compelled one night to get up really early in the morning. She's like, I'm just going to get this working. And something in his Google thing popped up, and she said she just put in his password and found the Amazon record. And the Amazon record was for the Malachite wedding rings. And she was doing this on October 11th, I believe. And she said the searches had been like October 2nd. And Tammy is still alive until the end of October. So at this time, she knows that Lori is missing, and she knows her brother's dead, and yet she's on his Amazon browsing, and there was a credit card purchase, and she's seeing the stuff, knowing that it's obviously not Charles, and she knew that probably this was Lori using this, and that is how she found, by October, she found the address. So she'd been looking for JJ, didn't know where Lori had taken him, found the stuff being sent to Rexburg. And then by October, Brandon had already gotten shot at. He was hired a private eye. And so Kay said she started paying half of the private eye. And so as soon as she found this, she told the private eye that they were using to find the kids, and found that they were at this Rexburg address, which is kind of a miracle that she thought to look into her dead brother's Amazon records and found that where the things were being shipped, Rexburg, Idaho. That's how they knew. And they gave that tip to the detective. And then the detective worked with that Detective Moffat, who they were, everybody in Chandler was working with, to find the missing kids. And also they thought why somebody shot at Brandon, because Melanie's, Lori's niece, Melanie, not Melanie Gibb, the other Melanie, was up there too. She had disappeared. So that's why Brandon was interested. So basically, everybody is looking for this little group that has disappeared that seems tied to the shooting. Well, they knew that Alex had shot Charles in self-defense, and now they were, thinking, and once they found out about all the marriage stuff, right? So why is this in the Daybell trial? Well, it's to show that Chad was, that this stuff was being purchased, and this wedding was being planned October 2nd, and Tammy doesn't get dead, isn't killed until October 19th. So timing wise, doesn't look good for Chad. Now, remember, Pryor is saying Lori did all this. So he's going to say Lori shopped. Lori used Chad's things. Lori's brother killed Chad. Chad wasn't really, like, he's not in on it, but we heard the text. Regardless, the next person on the stand then was Angela Yancey. Now, Angela Yancey is the Idaho Falls. She works somewhere now in Idaho Falls, but she used to work for Tammy's school system. I think it's Sugarland Schools. She was the school district's insurance person. So remember, before they talked to an insurance broker that was of another plan. This person was the school's insurance plan, and she explained how Tammy had a $5,000 coverage through the group coverage, and then she had elected the first time she was able, when she went full time, to make to get the minimum $10,000 extra. So that would be $60,000 in case she died. Then the next time that she was able to up her insurance at all, she didn't. She didn't change anything. Now, this lady could have told, she was the one that knew that Tammy had said to her when she did want to re-up her insurance to the max, that supposedly we heard there was a statement that Tammy said, well, my husband wants me to do this. Now, don't forget, the broker yesterday said, remember this number, that Chad had first come to her wanting insurance for him and Lori and his kids, because he used to have insurance through his wife who had passed. And he was saying that his business was at a loss. He made zero money, that his wife had been the breadwinner, right? Now listen to this. So when Tammy, we don't get to hear about Tammy saying her husband, that statement was a motion in limine that got overruled. Not overruled. What do you call it? They were not allowing that. So we don't get to hear that part. But she did say, so after the first time she was able to up it, she did not elect to do that. But then in the fall of 2019, in September, and it opened August 1st, this election opened to, you could up your elected personal part of your insurance plan until September 15th was the opening time. And September 8th, Tammy walks in, and now we know that there was a statement that law enforcement says and wanted in, that she said, oh, my husband really wanted me. He was pushing me to do this. And it is September 8th, and the last day was September 15th. Lori moved up to Rexburg the end of August. And then we think September, I think September 8th or 9th is when Tylee was last seen. Anyway, Chad sent Tammy to get more life insurance, is what we didn't get to hear in court, but we think happened. Anyways, she went in there and she upped it to the max. The max is 5 times your salary. She upped it to $80,000. So she had the $50,000 and the $80,000. So $130,000 altogether. Yes, that works out to be, we all did the math, $16,000 a year. And somebody in the chat was like, no, that can't even be possible for a full-time person. She couldn't be a real librarian for that amount of money. That's probably part-time. And people had to point out, look, this is Idaho. This is very rural Idaho, probably not a union state. When people say they hate unions, why should we have unions? They get people a working wage. Tammy worked 35 hours a week, $16,000 a year as a librarian, which means librarians work almost every single minute except for their lunch hour, because there's always a teacher coming in with a different class. So that's really not very much money that she was making, but so that was what she was allowed. So next, the lady said, after saying, like, this is how it happened, now we know also, remember from the broker lady the day before, Chad makes $30,000 a year. So that's even weirder that a woman who's making $16,000, he's going to depend on her insurance. Because it's not like she wasn't the main breadwinner. He was. And she was helping him too. Although he called her lazy at her eulogy, she was doing his books, doing all the digital stuff for spring books, because he was a writer, and what he was a cheater. But anyways, and she was doing this full-time library gig. Anyway, so and she worked and she helped out at her church. We learned like at least 4 hours a week. So yeah, Tammy was lazy, Chad. Sure. Anyway, so Tammy had to fill out a request form, and the it had to be filled out, and the coverage had to be changed, um and then it was signed by both Chad and Tammy. So Chad absolutely knew that Tammy upped the insurance because he had to sign it. He had to sign it because there was no medical there was no they didn't have to do a bunch of like a medical form again. Although they did have to, I think they had to sign that like she was in good health. Um all right. So the claim, so here's the thing. So September 8th, like, right before the end of that open enrollment election period to elect to get more of your own, she came in and upped it to the max. And then she dies October 19th, which is between Friday and Saturday night. So supposedly she woke up, she died. She rolled out of bed when she was stiff as a board, and that woke up Chad at 6 a.m. Um, the claim was submitted for getting that insurance by Chad Monday morning, the 21st. So Tammy dies between Friday night and Saturday. And by Monday, Chad is right there getting the insurance. How do I do this? And she goes, well, okay. She said she was very surprised because usually she has to wait, I mean, to see if people make a claim. And she goes, most often she waits like a respectable amount of period of grieving. And then she will contact the family and say, did you know that your wife, your spouse, whoever had an insurance? A lot of teachers, not everybody, but a lot of teachers are wives of somebody. And so, maybe again, they're not dependent on that salary. I don't know. But still, people are usually grieving for a while. And she said, yeah, usually she had to go find the families and say, I don't know if you were aware that the school had this policy and this is how you fill out these forms. And she said, no, Chad was right there. And she said, okay, well, the first thing we need is a death certificate. And Chad told her, oh, well, I already ordered 8 of those. So, and she's like, okay, 8, got it. So she remembered that. That was weird. Then he, she said, just an experience that was unusually fast. And um, then she said that the beneficiary statement had to be filled out. And um, so along with the death certificate, Chad had to fill out this beneficiary statement. And there was a question about when did the health of the deceased become impaired? And Chad had filed October 18th of 2019. Now, if you remember, she died between late 18th and early October 19th. Now, that is odd, right? Because remember, I don't know if you remember, but Chad's story is, oh my God, she was getting weaker and weaker. And Emma even said she couldn't keep up and she was coughing and she had anemia and her family had a history of heart disease. We also learned today that he told somebody at a family meeting that, oh, and she gained 40 pounds. So that must have killed her. I'm like, okay, first of all, Chud, I doubt that because you'd be dead. He's just completely inappropriate, and for a grieving spouse seemed very odd. So she just said there was no mention of her being sick on that form, nothing, that the employee's statement, uh, all of that was the claim was next discussed, and she filled it out and he got the money. $130,000 went to Chad. And that claim, she looked, and it had been paid out October 30th. So he came in as soon as he could, got that. I think it was October 25th. She said he came in October or yeah, see, she died on the 19th. He came on the 20th. Oh, she was out of town and he was like, "Well, when is she going to be back?" Came back, like he was ready on like on the 25th, I believe. And then he had to wait a couple extra days. And then by the 30th, he was Johnny on the spot getting that money. All right. So, after that, let's see. Then Chad's mom was on the stand, and you could tell she didn't really want to say anything negative about her son, but she wasn't going to lie. So Lindsay Blake did the questioning. It was really very sad because you could tell, like, she was like, "Yeah, we were surprised about Tammy, and then we are surprised." He said when he said it, like a week later, that he had met this woman, and he had met her. He'd met her a year ago, so he actually knew her, and he felt that this was God's calling, and um, this was meant to be. And then she asked, they met Lori at a Texas Roadhouse restaurant, steakhouse. And Lori, she said, was very bubbly and pretty. And she asked her about, well, things that you would ask people, like if she was married, and Lindsay had to pull like teeth out of this. Did you ask her if she was married before? Yes. What did she say? She said that her husband had recently passed of what? Of a heart attack. That was their story to a lot of people. And we know that he was shot by Alex Cox. Um, and she was using the name for some of the insurance stuff, as Ryan. So it, it's really, she wasn't really, sometimes she was Lori Vallow, but she had told people she was Lori Ryan Vallow. It's very interesting. Um, Anyways, then they said about, have you had children before? And Chad said yes. She did have a daughter who died, and she recently passed. Like, basically, we don't want to talk about it. So when the whole thing, and then then she knew they didn't know where they were living. They were living in Hawaii. And when she met them, it was in early November when they came back for that little time after getting married in Hawaii. And she said, "Oh, I noticed you're wearing rings. Are you engaged?" And they said, "No, we're married." So they didn't let anybody know. And then Pryor tried to get her to say, "Well, like in the Mormon faith, like men, they go on their missions, but they people do get married right away, right?" And she was like, "Well, yes, yeah, that's true." And then he said, Lindsay Blake on redirect was like, "And so in your faith, is it normal for widowed, to get remarried within 2 weeks?" And she was like, "No, that's not very common." So not very good, Prior. And then after the break was Heather Daybell. Oh, let's see. I have to see how I did this because I went back and forth. Heather Daybell got on the stand, and I didn't know this, but apparently the one thing that I guess Lauren on Hidden True Crime, who herself is in Idaho, used to be on TV. She used to be Mormon, so she knows about the LDS faith. And she was talking, and she's also was a reporter. So on her podcast, she uses her reporting skills and has interviewed a lot of people, including Heather Daybell. But I guess there was this letter, this email, and the big deal was supposed to be that it was sent. I think the big deal was that it was sent to an investigator, kind of like Heather involved herself in, like, she hated Chad so much, she involved herself in the investigation, and she sent this to this David Hope guy, who happened to also be her daughter's father-in-law. And what it was there was a letter that she was at the time, a stake president. She held the stake presidential calling and had to, the actual president, maybe the LDS prophet, the head of the LDS church. I don't know. Somebody had sent, somebody way above her had sent a message that he wanted distributed through like their email chains. And so she started out her email, dear sisters and brothers or whatever, I'm writing to you with this story that some brother so and so or whatever pastor wants to be, wants you to read and whatever, reflect upon. And then, and this letter, I guess Heather Daybell's letter to David Hope is out on the internet if you'd like to search. Today was too busy. I did not search that out. But from what I gathered, the big deal was because Pryor was trying to get her to read this letter, but not read it into the record and have it be evidence. So I was like, what? Something's wrong with this letter. And people in chat were saying, okay, here's the deal. The letter was, how we all know how email works. I don't think John Pryor does. He was trying to be like, oh, and did you send it to this person? Oh, you distributed it to this person, didn't you? But the problem is, obviously, with emails, and the one that he had copied and gave her was not to the person she directly sent it to. Instead, somebody had forwarded it. You know how it says forwarded? So this David Hope, she did not directly send this to him being like, oh, I know you're an investigator and I want to tell you about this. So she sent this presidential story. And then below it, apparently she wrote, I would also like to make you aware of something that's been concerning me going on in our ward. And what she was concerned about was Chad Daybell's teachings. And she had been hearing about them for a while. They had moved up into Rexburg because they lived there. She and her, Matt, she is Chad's sister-in-law. She married Chad's brother, Matt. And Pryor was trying to get on the stand to get the mom to say, like, oh, you like Emily, right? Your one daughter-in-law. And he wanted to go and do you like Heather because he knew she was coming. And as he was going into it, the prosecution, Wilcox guy was like, thank God they're starting to do a lot more objections to Pryor getting into all that stuff. They're like, relevance. Why does she need to tell? Why did Mrs. Daybell need to tell how she felt about her daughters-in-law? Because they wanted to bring up that she sent out this letter because she didn't like what Chad was saying. She didn't like the end of the world crap. She didn't. She didn't like how he seemed to be not talking to Tammy as much, but he was walking with Julie Rowe real close on their property. And because we all know he was into Julie Rowe and told her all the crap before Lori took the bait. And she thought, Chad said that their land would become part of this tent city in the calling of the call out for the 144,000, which upset her because in their religion, it is the prophet, the main one in Salt Lake City, who would, if there would be a call out, that's who would do it. The prophet, the head of the church, like their pope, not Chad Daybell, who thought he was getting visions. And she thought that was blasphemous and it was inappropriate and it was dangerous. And so she told people about not to trust what they are hearing. And I think a lot of people in Rexburg, like the Gilberts kind of did, and they said they sort of, believed in Chad's visions. People were buying into this, and she was blowing the whistle. And when those kids came up missing, who was right? But before that, nobody knew. And, Chad's got visions. He's special. There's going to be all these trials and tribulations and end of times. And Chad knows all about it. And Heather's smart. She's like, Chad is a doofus. He is not getting visions. He sounds insane. He doesn't sound holy. Anyway, so she lays out some of this in a polite way, but sends it out. Well, Chad's, I forget who everybody, but people find out in Chad's family, and Chad's dad especially called Heather a pot stir. And boy, you would thought John Pryor was so, oh, and what is a pot stir, Heather? I'm like, oh, you are such an asshole. You are the pot stir, John Pryor, and you are dumb. And we know Chad had dead bodies of kids of his wife, and they lied about it. And so, do you think he knew? He knew John Pryor. He freaking knew. But, anyways, John wants to make it look like Heather is, I don't know what he was doing. What he made her look like was she was the sane person surrounded by idiots who were getting taken in by a charlatan. And she was saying, "Oh my God, this is insanity. Something's wrong here." And boy, was she proven right. And that's the thing. At the end of the day, she's right. And John Pryor asked almost everybody, he keeps asking about those damn stairs in that room. And Heather Daybell said, "It is an addition on the back of the house. Yes, there is a room up there." And he tries to discredit that, which I don't understand because Nate Eaton proved without a doubt, it's already in evidence in this trial that Chad was up in that bedroom when the detectives came. And the detective talked about Garth having to go get Chad upstairs because he was sleeping in that room that had a window that you could see out where the children were buried, which is creepy. Don't you think? Don't you think, Skelly? Creepy AF, right? Skelly knows. Creepy AF. All right. So that Heather Daybell, the very last thing she was asked was, "And why were you concerned?" And she said, "Well, I became more concerned when there were the missing kids of Lori's, and then they were found dead. And then we knew about Tammy. And so the dead children and Tammy is why I was concerned," or something. And then it's like, "Great job, Pryor. You really brought it home." Anyways, Heather Daybell, she might have been losing her religion in the end. Partially, I think, because all those people were buying in to Cuckoo Coconuts, Chad Daybell, and she, the really good pious person, the person who really did care enough to put her own life on the line, was trying to ring the bell. Danger, danger. And John Pryor made it like, "Oh, so you thought it would hurt your reputation in the community?" Like she was somebody who only cared about how things looked. John Pryor. All right. Um, and and then there was a big break. So I turned over and watched some and looked up some coverage on the Karen Reed trial. And I am not the person to talk about this, but I'll just tell you real quickly. I read what was the tweets from Bob Mata Defense Diaries, and he sort of gives a very good, concise what the testimony was going on. And apparently, 3 more firefighters were on the witness stand today that I saw him talk about, and one of them uh, said he did hear that he saw Karen Reed really trying to save um, John O'Keefe, that she was the one that was upset, and that, but he said he did hear her say, "I hit him, I hit him." And then I guess on redirect, I mean, you can't lie. And and I have something to say about this whole thing, about why cognitively, I think it's happening. So, I mean, like, why these people think they're doing things, and then how it's so easily is unraveled. All the defense had to show was, they're like, "Okay, so here's the camera from," I don't know if it was from a cop's car or from his rig, but it clearly showed, I guess, that he was nowhere near Karen Reed. He couldn't hear what she was saying. They had no conversation because he had said, she said in this conversation, like, "Would he be all right?" And "I hit him," which is the party line in this story. And yet he's like, "How could you physically do it?" And then he sort of like had to, he was impeached. That means it was obviously he lied. All right. The next guy, I don't know, his mother or father or aunt or grandma, grandpa, whoever raised him, raised this guy right, because he obviously understands. Look, the federal government's looking into this, and if you got to choose sides, I'm going to choose not to go down for somebody I don't even know, just because there seems to be this, protection line. And he's like, yeah, no, didn't hear her say that. No, just saw her. She was screaming, is he dead? Is he dead? Over and over again, hysterical, trying to save him. Yeah, no, I didn't hear her say she hit him. Okay. And then they put a third female firefighter. I don't know if she's also an EMT. I think her name was like Hannah McIntyre. Anyways, she was on the stand, and no, she heard I hit him. I hit him too. So here's the deal. This part now, all my supposition, but I just want to say, I think when people go, oh, this is a conspiracy theory, and people who believe they're lying are conspiracy theorists who would make up all this, I don't think it's made up to think that this man either went in the house or on his way in the house had some trouble with somebody, um, said something smart. Who knows? Everybody was drinking heavily. There was a fight. He did get hit. There was a dog in the house that has since been disappeared. Um, I think he left the house or they threw him out after this fight. I mean, I don't think somebody decided, let's kill him by putting him outside. I think there was a fight, an altercation, things got real ugly. There was a lot of F you, F you, I'm leaving, F you. He walks out, or even he's thrown out, and they're like, good riddance. Okay. And they continue drinking or whatever. And then, like at 3 o'clock in the morning, everybody knew there was a nor'easter coming in. Somebody gets up, goes to the bathrooms, looking at their phone and walking by a window. Now the snow is just starting to fall, not it ends up being like a 6 inch to 8 inch storm. So it is just starting. Looks outside and is probably like, holy, I think that's that guy. He's lying out there. You know, Quickly Googles, because she misspelled the Google, like, how long can someone stay outside in the snow before dying? Um, Not a good answer. Then at 6 o'clock in the morning, when Karen Reed is calling and trying to find John O'Keefe that she dropped off at their house, then suddenly, we don't know if anybody tells her, oh, you probably hit him. The cops think you hit him. We just know then all these people descend. We don't know between 3 a.m., because I don't think they never went into the house, and I don't think they took every single person's phone and did the Cellubrite on it. So we don't know if there were phone calls to people of a friendly nature to get there. You know what? Get on rigs, get over there. We gotta clean this up. I 100% believe that that the people and the cops that knew each other decided, look, she was wasted. She doesn't remember. We're just gonna say she hit him. It's an accident, right? It's a simple uh, DUI, involuntary manslaughter. But Karen Reed is not like, her personality is like, I don't do this. Like at first she was like confused, but then the more like, she's not an idiot, and she seems pretty smart, and so yeah, she fights it. Now the more she fights the the involuntary manslaughter charge, the more they're gonna like go, oh, you think that's gonna go that way, little girl? Well, hey, how about we charge you with murder? You like them apples? You're not gonna take the involuntary manslaughter? Okay, we'll show you what we can do. And then it became like intimidation in certain crowds, and that police department had already had, that town has a bad rap. So do I think that somebody was doing somebody else a solid? Because I think it was a complete accident. This is how most cover-ups start. Someone makes up a lie because they're scared, and if they would just have said, "Oh my god, we were all drinking like crazy people, and yeah, there was a fight. Our dog attacked him. We had him get the F out. We didn't know he didn't make it to wherever he was going. I mean, we thought he was fine. And then 3 o'clock in the morning, we see him laying out there. They probably should have rendered aid then. That is the big mistake. But saying some guy left your house drunk, yeah, he got beat up. Now, was he unconscious and they threw him outside thinking the cold will sober him up, not realizing that that would kill him, or not caring because they were wasted at that time, sort of forgot about it? I don't know. That's what I think really happened in the Karen Reed case. That is all my speculation, 100%. I can't prove any of that. Do I think I definitely think the gouges that you see in the autopsy picture look way more like dog attacks. That does not look like he got dragged by a car. He's missing his coat. How did a car just get one arm through a coat, but the coat's not there because all the clothes were lost? All right, last but not least, the Colt. Okay, Kohlberger. All right, this case, I need some water. This case gets people heated. Heated. I haven't talked about this case in a while. So apparently there was a hearing today, and there had been stuff that came out yesterday. The hearing today was that, and if you're watching Delphi, it's going to sound a little familiar. The state gave the defense video of the Elantra stuff, but it is modified and it has no audio. And we know that video with audio, I don't know what other audio stuff they're talking about, but they said it's already been modified. They want the raw data, which they deserve. Also, I found out that the community survey that people are all up in arms are that the judge obviously had to let it go ahead. Let me just tell you, my background's in my doctorate was in, like I said, cognition, motivation, personality, reasoning, how people think, as well, and how people learn, and leadership, and how people follow leaders and different styles of leadership, as well as my minor was in statistics, specifically measurement. So when I heard the guy talk about the hearing that was about the community thing, I had heard of that. We've in my classes about how to make scales and how to do measurement. We talked a lot about surveys, and community surveys I knew were a thing, especially to find out prejudice and bias. Now, I would have asked some of the questions a little bit differently, but guess what? He had a really great educational background. He went to the best places for cognitive psychology in Florida, where the Seminoles are. Go Seminoles. And then he also went to UNLV for his doctorate in the statistical analysis and community sociology specific. He did extra work. He's had a great education, and his explanation was, if you have the right background, it was very understandable. So when people say, oh, he's ruining the community. So here's the deal. He didn't say which side he was from. He was asking them first, do you know anything about this? And if they said no, he didn't inform them. So he wasn't adding bias. And when he was asking them if they knew things, the other thing that they could do is they knew who they called. You take that person, if that person had been called for the survey, then they would not make the jury pool if it's found that that area is not biased. And he said he worked on a bunch of this is big in high profile cases. The Shepherd case, you might have heard about the one-armed man. Remember The Fugitive, that movie? Okay, that was made about a case in Ohio, in Cleveland, a doctor whose wife was attacked. He and the wife were attacked. The wife was killed, and everybody said, no, he did it. Anyways, that case not only spawned the movie, but a very specific Supreme Court case saying when you have tons of media and then that person is tried in that area where all the media was, they can't get a fair they didn't get a fair trial. You can't count that because everybody already knows ahead of time. They think they've been told by everybody he did it. So one of the ways to counteract that is to, get a change of venue. And one of the ways to get a change of venue is you have to prove that there was that everybody already has heard all this stuff about the case. So you have to ask them if they knew. This is not like the jury where you poison the jury pool. This is asking the community. And they asked, I believe, 400 people total in all of the county. And while that sounds like a lot, it was like 5% of the population, I believe. Those people just aren't able to be on the jury then. You take them out because they've already been asked the questions. That's why I knew that wasn't that big of a deal. So when everybody got all worked up about it, I'm like, you are just asking to see. And by the way, if you want to blame anybody, I hate to say this because I don't know how I would be so out of my mind if my kid died, but Steve Gonzalez and his family went all in 100%. Even though there was a gag order, still talking about that, like they were the ones. I remember Steve saying, "Oh, they had proof." They kept saying things like that. Well, they did their own computer analysis and they had proof that Brian had stalked those kids, some of those girls. He had stalked them on the internet, on the socials. I remember him saying that. Um, Probably to Ashley Bamford in that interview on News Nation. Maybe. I may be remembering that wrong. Just my opinion. Okay, so and yes, he was very upset, and I understand that, but the problem is that's that information was then disseminated by huge networks, and then everybody on YouTube talked about it, and then it became like a fact. Where'd you hear it from? I don't know. I know it was on television, so they must have found it. You don't remember that the dad who was freaked out was probably, I mean, I don't know what his proof was, but guess what? We also found it was negated in court. No, Brian Koberger did not. There's no evidence that he fouled them in social media. He did not. So, but everybody heard that. That is the problem with this, all this pre-trial media coverage. And quite frankly, uh, they first did Latah County. Now they're going outside of that county and doing the other two counties next to it just to see how far this problem is. And I'm assuming this is going to be tried in Boise, just like the Daybell case was. And I don't know what other big cities are in Idaho, if there's a closer one, but you need a big, huge city because that little college town has been traumatized. Nobody there is ever going to be able to be fair to anybody accused of that crime because they're traumatized. They've heard about it. They hate that guy. He's the one. Like a lot of people are convinced and they talk about it, I'm sure, all the time. And the house belonged to the school and the school tore down the house. And there's too much in that county. I don't even know why they have to prove that, but they do have to prove it. And so people thinking that the survey, I will just say from a statistician background, that is there's not evidence to prove that asking people about what they heard actually creates bias. Because those people aren't going to end up on the jury. You would exclude them. You would exclude probably if anybody said, "Oh, I talked to somebody." Did you talk to anybody whoever was surveyed? And if they said, "Oh yeah," then they're out. That's how this works. So the hearing was about both getting the information that they want, and then I guess the FBI doesn't give up a lot of information, and I don't know why, because in the Daybell case, we heard the FBI talk about the cast map and the cast information, and Ann Taylor wants the cast information because she said, "Oh, the state doesn't like the skinny grandpa, the eat more papa grandpa, if you know, prosecutor Bill. He doesn't want to accept the alibi that Koberger has given. So Koberger has said he was out driving, and then he added to like specific park he went to, and Taylor has said, well, we have phone data, metadata that shows definitively he wasn't there when you say the murders occur. Again, Delphi. Is anybody getting Delphi hints here? Anyway, um, I guess she wants without to get. I'm not sure about what the alibi does for the state. I think then once the alibi is set, the state will give the very specifics about the crime scene timeline, but they don't want to give it before they accept an alibi. So they have to lock in the alibi. I don't know. So Ann Taylor wants the FBI's casting information. Bill, the DA, is saying like, "Well, I can't get it from them. I can't make them." We don't even have a trial date set, and it's already super contentious about discovery. Again, Delphi, right? Um, so we are going to find out more. The state doesn't want any more hearings to be open because of this. So I don't know if that's going to be for the future, but the very next hearing, we're not going to hear anything about. They're going to hash out those details about, um, they're going to hash out about the alibi and getting the information, and that's going to be the next weeks. They're going to be doing this. So we will find out sort of more, but we won't. It might start ending being more like Delphi, where if there's something put out in a filing, we might be able to see it. But for right now, they are not going to be okay with it. So, sorry, I'm trying to read my writing here. So the next hearings are going to be on the 14th and the 16th of May, and they are going to be closed as they discuss the disagreements. And I wrote, Daddy Judge doesn't like, uh, he doesn't like the people getting too personal. He doesn't like the tone. Daddy Judge is not very happy with how the kids are playing together. This is a death penalty case, so it seems also like in Delphi, Nick. Now, I think Nick is way worse than Bill. I think Bill is trying his hardest, and it's a very serious case, and he feels a lot of pressure. But I think, like, sometimes when these DAs from a small town start talking about, well, it's not fair that we have to do this, and it's not fair, Judge. And you're like, okay, your life is not on the line. Like, the reason the defense gets so much is because you could kill this person. So, and there was just something, I watch a podcast called Southern Fried True Crime Podcast. It is very good. You can find it on all the places you can find podcasts. And there's a YouTube where the woman does some pictures with it. But Southern Fried Podcast. I was watching one episode last night, and it was talking about there had been a man found to be working in one of the, I think he was a crime lab worker. I don't think he might have even been with the FBI. And he was the guy you went to, and he was lying. And when they found out he was a liar and was like faking evidence, it like overturned all these cases. But also, somebody had been put to death based on his false information. And how do you bring that back? So when the defense in these cases where there's death penalty possible acts very egregiously maligned because they're not getting what they need, they really need it because it's life or death. When the state goes, oh, it's not fair, honey. What do you mean it's not fair to you? You are the state. You have all the cards. Give the defense the discovery. And that acting like they're somehow even it's a little, I mean, when in the Dabo case, like, you're like, give them all, It doesn't matter. When someone is really guilty, it doesn't matter that you give them every single freaking piece of evidence, everything anybody ever wrote. Because you know what? You know, and they know they're guilty. So you give them every single freaking benefit. Daybell case trial, that is why they are allowing John Pryor to act like a fool. They let him sometimes, not all the time now, thank goodness, but he testifies. Oh, isn't it true that blah, 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 right? That is called not only leading, he's testifying and just saying right at the end. But half the time the state lets them do it. You know why? Because they know they've got this guy by the short hairs. He's not getting out. They know. They have it locked down. So, you know, it is disconcerting to see the state act like somehow their rights are being violated because they have to turn something over when it's not. Yeah, you have to turn everything over. Them's the rules, especially when you kill somebody. And we would all want that, right? Wouldn't you want that? I would want that for me and mine. And I'm sure you would too. All right, you guys, it's been over an hour. And that's all I have to say. Skelly, do you have anything to add? Skelly doesn't have anything to add. Good night. See you tomorrow.